give them a quick recap.
Okay, we're all set.
You're all good?
Yes.
Okay, so let me get things started. Good evening, all. My name is Paul Goldstein. I am chair of our Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee of Community Board 1. Some of you've already met Diana Sweetai, who's our Director of Planning and Land Use. And also with us is Andrew Zelter, the co-chair of our committee. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from her soon, from him soon. Okay, so let's jump into the agenda. Item number 1 is called Gateways to Chinatown. Many of you might recall that we did actually deal with this item back in 2019 when there was a proposal that came before our community board. This is right on the border between boards 1 and 3, as I'm sure the presenters will let us know. And they have some updates to that plan that we reviewed back then and will tell us what the status is. So with that, let me start by introducing Karen Patterson. And Karen, you'll introduce the rest of your team as you go along. Is that okay? And just introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, I'm Karen Patterson. I'm with DOT's Urban Design, and also joining me today are Nick Pedinati, our Deputy Director, and Neil Gagliardi, our Director of Urban Design at DOT.
Okay, take it away.
Hi, I'll be
yes.
starting with Neil, correct?
Yeah, Paul, we were at the board 1 in the summer of 2019, as you mentioned. So the project has changed quite a bit since that time. We kind of pared down in response to the board's, commentary, as well as a lot of community input that we had. And I'll just go through some background and history just for others. And just start off with just mentioning that, for close to 10 years, DOT has been collaborating with the Chinatown Partnership to formulate a comprehensive plan for Chinatown. And if we look at the next slide, you'll recall that at the origin of it is a identification of 7 gateways, highlighting and enhancing the entries into and out of Manhattan Chinatown. And we're focused on the Canal Street Triangle, which is identified in the middle, which is really in the center of Manhattan's Chinatown. And if we look at the next slide, as I mentioned, this is a result of decades of neighborhood advocacy and planning that dates way back to 1974. I'll spare you the long history, but with the Chinatown Street revitalization study by the Department of City Planning, fast forward to 2004, there was an America's Chinatown community plan by Asian Americans for Equality. And all the way up until this date right now. So if we look at the next slide, you're all familiar with this location. It's a rather small triangle, traffic triangle, basically, on the edge of Canal Street and bounded by Baxter Street and Walker Street. And as you said, on the edge of Community Board 3 and Community Board 1. I should mention that we did present this presentation to the Community Board 3 last month. So it's kind of a repeat performance of that presentation. And if we look at the kiosk itself and the view on the next slide, you'll all know recognize the 9x9 kiosk, red kiosk that was constructed in 2004 and funded by the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation after 9/11 as part of an overall effort to improve tourism the kiosk is managed. It's been managed by the Chinatown Partnership, and intermittently it's staffed to provide information. We've updated in partnership with the partnership over time, including a significant Walk NYC map on the side of the kiosk, and there's a small video screen displaying some of the activities going on throughout the neighborhood. And on the next slide, just a brief recap. You know, in 2016, we kicked off the original RFP effort with community input. We kind of formulated the request for proposals, which kind of laid out 5 significant goals, mostly wayfinding and orientation. What was also significant for the respondents at that time was cultural identity, that the site should reflect that. There was also an important aspect of community information, digital connectivity. This again was all part of that original RFP in 2017 that was issued. The significance of green space, even though it's such a small space in itself, and the need for social interaction at this location. And if we look at the next slide, you'll all recall in the summer of 2019, you're smiling a bit. You know, the response from the RFP process, we received 80 plus respondents of the, and if you go back just a little bit, Karin, this was the winning response at that time, which we presented. It featured a significant vertical tower and sculptural element as part of the proposal, and that's what we presented as the next slide shows, on a very balmy summer night at Community Board 1, where the UAP team and I also presented the kind of the background to the board, and there were a lot of community residents and stakeholders who attended that meeting who had specific and rather incisive commentary about it. I should mention on the next slide, what the Board 1, as you recall, did issue a very significant letter that really laid out in very succinct terms, about the response to the proposal. The letter referred to the proposal as not really as generating negative comments, and actually not reflective of the neighborhood itself, which led us to a series of, in response after that, a kind of regrouping in response to all the input we got. And we proceeded to convene a number of intimate roundtable discussions with select people who were interested, who showed up at the community board meeting, who had a lot of creative and constructive responses, and we really, took that down and developed new design goals and objectives based on that, which really focused on circulation. A lot of commentary was about buffering the traffic and noise of Canal Street along the Canal Street edge. There was also a need for an express need for flexible programmable areas for the community, that this was necessary for like a gathering space, and also providing space for intermittent activities, and also significant cultural identity and the space of exchange. That we needed to really allow the community to express itself. And when I say community, also the nearby Little Italy community as well, that this was a pivotal space of exchange, not a kind of top-down approach at iconography. And if we go to the next slide, So in December of last year, we presented 3 options to community boards and stakeholders. There were over 22 active attendees. There were representatives from the community boards, as I said, and City Hall and elected officials. What was significant was it was a webinar, and we did a number of polling questions during that stakeholder, which was very effective. Zoom is kind of a silver lining in the sense that it allowed us to really poll very directly how people were responding to these particular options. And we also did have a number of facilitated breakout sessions, which were very instructive in getting people to discuss their concepts and understanding of the proposals. And if you look at the next slide, I think some of the result of that, there was an acknowledgement that we were being responsive to community and stakeholder feedback. I think that was key, and that was very rewarding for us as well. This was not intended to be a top-down approach. We had some constraints, but I think that was a rewarding response. Specifically about the options, there was a preference for a planted area along Canal Street. As I mentioned, this kind of buffering of Canal Street and the traffic. There was a consensus that the space is more a meeting point and a circulation portal rather than a place for relaxation. So that was something that we took back and incorporated in the proposal. What was significant was also a polling showed that the existing kiosk is not a significant draw and does not really serve the greater community, although it did serve some, tourist interaction and information. And then there was a strong preference, and this was key. We went back to the digital aspect that was original to the RFP, a strong preference for interactive digital interfaces with current engaging information and exhibitions as a possibility. If you go to the next slide, we subsequently went to the Public Design Commission after that stakeholder meeting. What came out specifically was this kind of preference for our BOSC option, meaning the retention of the existing 5 ginkgo trees, that this was a significant icon of the existing space that should be preserved and mitigated. There was also a feeling that the existing kiosk obstructs the circulation, which we have been mindful of. And some of the design direction is reflected in the presentation that Nick is I'm going to pass off to Nick now. Really just add as many trees as possible. What was significant from the PDC as well as the stakeholder was strengthen this east-west circulation and connection through the site, which is key to us at DOT as well to improve pedestrian circulation, and to study alternatives for the kiosk that could incorporate a dynamic and more digital connectivity of community engagement and collaboration, which we subsequently pursued as well. And if we go to the next slide, I think this is where, Nick, I'm going to pass it off to you now. This is a juxtaposition of the existing plan of the site, as well as the new development of the BOSC, which Nick is really going to walk you through now.
That sounds good. Thanks, Neil. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Neil, can you hear me? Okay, good. Just want to make sure before I get
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. Okay, so hi everybody. Nick, again, Deputy Director of Urban Design, DOT. Thanks again for the opportunity to present where we're at with the latest developments in the design. As Neil mentioned, sorry, I'm getting a circle. Thank you. Everybody still hear me? Is that okay?
Yes.
So as Neil mentioned, over December, we developed some initial conceptual options. We had the stakeholder meeting. Sorry. having a little bit of internet issues. Okay, hopefully that will be back. Sorry that you can't see my face. Hopefully that will save some of the internet problems. Again, we presented the initial concepts in December to both that stakeholder group as well as the design commission. And I think we really received some clear feedback, especially from the design commission, to pursue the option that preserves the existing tree site. And so we've taken that and really tried to run with it and further the design development. So you can see here in this slide on the left is the existing triangle space with the kiosk, as well as the grove of trees and the planted area that's beneath it. On the right is our proposed design. If you go to the next slide, Karen. So fundamentally, the focus of this design really is on improving circulation through the site while still maintaining those existing trees. Sort of one of the comments from the design commission was actually that those trees in and of themselves are iconographic for the site. It's one of the few places along Canal Street where you actually do run into some green. And so the design that celebrates that was one that they really viewed very favorably. At the same time, I think they very much understood the need for this space to function as a pass-through, as well as a place to gather. And so the design really focuses in these diagrams on expanding and improving the circulation possibility of the site, essentially by removing the planting bed that is beneath the existing trees, replacing it with pavement that's permeable, and actually expanding the overall available to the trees, while still allowing it to be a hard surface for folks to walk on. And we'll show you a detail of what that looks like a little bit later in the patient. Yeah, Karen, if you go to the next one. So this is the design in plan as it stands currently. Again, the eastern portion of the triangle is really focused on preserving the existing trees, building out that planted buffer along Canal Street to pull people away from the traffic and the noise that's happening along that roadway. We're looking to add a couple of additional ginkgo trees to fill out the overall grove there. And again, the pavements tended to be a bonded aggregate permeable paver. The tree pit openings will be much smaller to allow for circulation between and through the trees. And then as you move to the western part of the triangle, this is really, again, we're talking about removing the existing kiosks, installing new planting areas to still build on that buffer from Canal Street, as well as a respite along Walker. The red arc that's at the top of this page, adjacent to that plant, is proposed as a digital information kiosk. So it's essentially a digital screen that would allow for the same functions of the existing kiosk in terms of being able to interact with a person from the Chinatown Partnership, get directions, recommendations, all through a more of a digital interface, while at the same time expanding the potential content in terms of art, cultural programming, historic programming, and a whole range of other potential content that we can then start to manage. So again, the western piece is really more of the gathering, programmable space where that exchange can happen. And then the eastern side of the triangle is really to celebrate those existing. And then the site is knit together with what we're proposing as a catenary lighting system. So there's a series of 5 poles that would support cables between them and allow for a softer light to be established throughout the site, and then also for potential flexibility in terms of artistic installation programming for Lunar New Year or whatever the celebration might end up being. If we go to the next slide, we can actually see what this starts to look like in renderings. We create a model of the space so we could really try to examine it from a lot of different angles and really start to understand and experience how the circulation and the ground plane works in this location. So this is an over a bird's eye aerial. We're sort of at the intersection of Walker and Baxter, floating above the roadway here, and you can see again that sort of eastern side of the triangle being focused on the grove of trees, and then again the western side focused more on the digital kiosk. and celebrating that as sort of the gateway through the space. If we go to the next slide, we'll see a perspective. This is crossing Walker Street as you're approaching. Again, you can see that space focused around the information kiosk as well as improved as you move through those ginkgo trees. We go to the next slide. Here we can start to see what it would be like if you were on the triangle. The image on the left is at the very narrow tip of the triangle as you're crossing Walker Street, whereas the image on the right is at the much wider portion. Here's the digital information screen. Again, we heard that there was not a desire to necessarily spend a ton of time in this space. It's really meant more for gathering and passing through. But at the same time, I did hear a number of comments where there's really a cadence of use throughout the day, where early in the morning, 6 a.m., where folks might be, meandering through the space and they want to take a quick stop to have a coffee. That kind of use is something that we want to be able to support, as well as all of the tourists and the hustle and bustle that happens in the middle of the day and, early evening, as well as, what happens in later hours and whatnot. And the goal of this design in general is really to try to address the fundamental space constraints and circulation while providing flexibility for the community to really start to program and make this space what it is meant to be, as really a welcome center to the neighborhood, a way to celebrate the neighborhood, and not just Chinatown, as Neil mentioned, Little Italy, the Lower East Side, Lower Manhattan as a whole. This really can become a critical node for that kind of experience. And the digital information screen, the catenary lights, allow for sort of a much more dynamic approach to the space, which was, I think, one of the key comments that we heard from both the design commission and the stakeholder meeting early on. The next slide, a quick look at what the approach is on the sort of wider side of the triangle. So the image on the left is what you would cross in Canal Street. The image on the right is what you would see if you were crossing Baxter Street. And then again, in the middle, sorry, and the image on the right is what you would see as you're crossing. So now the remainder of the presentation, we're going to get into some of the details to give you a better sense of what we're thinking about in terms of design and where we're at the moment. And then we'll talk a little bit about potential construction phasing and then open it up for questions. So the next slide, we'll start by talking about the digital information kiosk. Again, we've spent a lot of time since that December stakeholder meeting really trying to dig into the technology, doing the research in terms of what's out there on city streets already. You've got stuff like the Link NYC kiosks, the newsstands and bus shelters that support digital screens. So we know there's street furniture out there that does this already. We know there's certainly billboards and other media that's installed on private property that accomplishes very similar technology pieces. And across the world, there's this example, not only in transit systems, but also in similar retail districts in other countries. We're fairly confident that digital kiosk is feasible. We sort of checked that box. And now we're really working through the details of how do we ensure that it provides the functionality that folks have been asking for, that it's also maintainable, that it's durable, and that it's something that can sort of stand the trials and tribulations that it will face being in a public space. If we go to the next slide. One of the other things that we're still working through is the final form of what this kiosk may look like. The image that you saw in the renderings and that's shown on the left is showing one continuous screen. Again, that will likely be made up of multiple screens, but it's sort of an overall gesture at one large surface. I think some of the comments that we've started to hear when engaging with some of our cultural stakeholders and partners is it might be beneficial to screen into multiple functions, allow for, again, different uses throughout the day to target different user groups to really respond to the rhythm of people that we see moving through the space. Obviously, this is also trying to anticipate post-pandemic when things start to get back to normal, which is hopefully the direction that we're trending in. So this is one of the things that we're furthering and continuing to work on from the design development stage, and we'll continue to advance. The next slide, we wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of buckets of content that we're imagining, and this is definitely a much longer conversation that we're looking forward to having with the community at large, with the boards, and with our stakeholders. Certainly the cultural institutions in the neighborhood have been engaged and interested in how this will take shape. But we're thinking in three sort of main buckets: the cultural, historical, artistic programming that may be much more on a rotating basis or exhibition type basis. The sort of key functionality of the screens would be geared towards wayfinding and information exchange. And again, we have the Walk NYC system, the map that's been up there now for a number of years. That's so well worn, it's actually got a hole where people have put their finger. The "You Are Here" is right. Many people are touching the map to orient themselves. And then we do see, as a way of fiscal management and maintenance of this structure over time, allowing for the notion of sponsors. And again, this is something that we're still giving a lot of thought to. We want to make sure that it is as much as possible geared towards the local neighborhood as opposed to much larger companies, but we do want to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is sustainable and that they're, in partnership or in collaboration with the Chinatown partnership, our maintenance partner, is something that really stand the test of time. And then the next slide. And so along with this, we are, just to zoom seconds, thinking about how a success at the Canal Street Triangle in developing this motif is something that could ultimately translate across the various gateways that have been identified and start to link them all together from a programming perspective and from a digital information perspective. So again, this is just one of the many reasons why I think we've been encouraged to go in this direction. The original static information and to the stakeholders and to the community members' credits, they really pushed us to think about this in a 21st century way, and I think the design is much better for it. Next slide. So now pivoting to the other half of the triangle. Again, this is showing you a bit more detail on what we meant by that permeable surface. If any of you have been to Roosevelt Island and the new Four Freedoms Memorial, or not so new now, the pathways there are not too dissimilar from what we're thinking for this space, where it's a bonded aggregate material with relatively modest sized tree pit openings. That material is permeable, so it allows for water and air to infiltrate to the roots below. And then below that pavement, we would be looking at a suspended paving system or a structural soil that would support the loading requirements of the pavement, but allow tree roots to really grow through the medium and have access to all of the, again, that water and air that would be getting through the pavement. We have a great on site with the Parks Department earlier last month. I think it was the coldest day of the year because it was very, very cold. But they've been full, and ultimately we'll be reviewing the final details, but we were generally encouraged by that interaction and seem to be heading on the same page. So this is, again, a really critical detail in that it allows us to open up that circulation through those trees and really take advantage of the space while still being able to preserve the trees, which are, again, important. Next slide. And then the last detail we'll talk about before we get into construction is just the catenary lighting system. Again, we've started to do a bunch more research into the products and manufacturers that are available. The question here is we would have some key locations for poles to support a catenary system. It would be designed to allow for a sort of softer, warmer light to wash over the space, while at the same time having the flexibility to accommodate more artistic or cultural programming on a rolling or as-needed basis. Obviously, if anybody's walked through Chinatown recently, there's a number of lanterns that run above the streets, particularly where the restaurants are. We really felt this was a nice detail to try to bring that motif out to Canal Street and provide, again, flexibility for what ultimately could be displayed here over time. Next slide. And so the last bit we wanted to talk about was just construction phasing. Again, from a schedule perspective, we're working right now towards wrapping up the construction documents and finalizing all of these details by the end of April. We're planning to go back to the Design Commission, coordinate reviews with external agencies, and get final sign-offs. From a construction perspective, we're looking at a number of scenarios depending on the funding that we are able to secure. We have some amount already in the pot, if you will, but obviously there's a lot going on and a lot of uncertainty right now with the fiscal situation in the city, all the way up to the federal level. So we are trying to be cognizant of that and making sure that we could achieve benefits to this space with the amount of money that we do have, as well as what it might take to actually realize the full vision. So next slide will show what we're anticipating as a phase one, essentially focusing on improving the circulation through the eastern part of the triangle, installing the buffer, preserving those existing trees, while preserving the existing kiosk and the functionality that that brings to the site. Again, I think we recognize in a lot of our discussions the value of the kiosk and the services that it provides, while also understanding that from a physical design perspective, it is a real obstruction to moving through the site and being able to use the site for a multitude of purposes. So the next slide talks a little bit about the circulation that this phase would offer. Again, it opens up circulation through that existing grove of trees. We're able to install that first part of the buffer along Canal Street to pull people away from the edge of the roadway there. Again, while also still preserving the existing kiosk and its function. We have a couple renderings showing what that starts to look like. The next slide shows what that is from the Baxter Street side. So looking at the existing kiosk, not much of a change from what you would see today, in all honesty. But then if you go to the next slide, as we move further to the opposite end of the triangle, you could really start to see the transformation here, where circulation is opened up through that space. And then one other slide looking as if you were standing in front of the kiosk. Again, the ability to move through those trees is not something that you can do today and is really limiting in terms of how people are able to move the space. So while not ideal, and certainly we are advocating for full funding and the full implementation of the project as was shown earlier in the presentation, we do want to be mindful, and we are trying to take a sensitive approach to how this can evolve over time. The next slide then shows how we would come in with the remainder of the design on the western part of the triangle. So the 2 additional planting areas, the bench, the digital information kiosk, the 2 cherry trees to really round out the gateway component on this western portion of the triangle. And I think the last slide is just a rendering to end on, and we're happy to take questions. Again, thank you for the presentation, and I'll turn my video back on now. Interact more face to face.
Okay, you guys are done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. Very good, very informative. All right, let's open it up for discussion. Andrew, you have your hand up. Why don't you go first?
Sure. And first, thank you for a very detailed and comprehensive presentation. That was very informative. 2 quick questions. Do the addition of these trees in any way block important vehicular activity? You know, cars merging or turning or anything along those lines? And second, I believe you referenced you were before CB3 last week. I might have missed it, but did you reference, or were there any issues or objections that were raised by CB3 with respect to the current design plan?
Sure. So we were before CB3 in the middle of the month. It was a little bit longer than last week, just as a quick point of clarification. They did issue a resolution in support of the design elements. And one of the things that resolution also covered was, this was the biggest concern, was the project, while it doesn't necessarily address some of the pedestrian crossings to and from the triangle, and that was seen as a point of concern. Not something that necessarily would derail implementation of this specific project, but there was a request that we come back after evaluating what else we might be able to do to improve the crossings to and from. He'll definitely jump in if I got anything wrong there. And just on the tree point, we are making sure that we're following park standards, lighting them far enough away from the intersection so as to not cause visibility issues. And we are going to be selecting a very narrow growing cultivar of the ginkgo so that it doesn't impact any vehicular traffic along Canal Street or along Baxter Street as you're making it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, Rosa, why don't you go next?
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I had a question and a comment regarding the digital kiosk or the information display. I have to say it's a little, like, I guess the comment is that it's a little jarring that it's this, very large space that completely blocks off the other side. And so I have to say that, my personal preference would be for the one that's sort of more segmented so that there is some visual porosity from one side to the other. Otherwise, it sort of feels like a wall that's trying to block you off. But, that's personal opinion. But I noticed on one of your renderings that you had given the view from Canal Street that you showed the other side, which is, I guess, on the tree side as being blank. And so I'm wondering, is there any display functionality on that side? I believe it was page 19 in your document, your presentation. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, so view 1 crossing Canal Street. So it looks like it's basically just a solid blank wall there. And because there is significant traffic on Canal, I feel like if you're going to bother going through the effort of essentially putting a large digital screen there, then the backside can't be so obviously just a forgotten backside. It should actually be something that is also, whether it be digital or not, but something that is engaging or activated in some way. I think that would be helpful to this effort. But thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative.
Yeah, no, and thank you for the comments. I think they are very much on point. The one thing that rendering doesn't show is that we are anticipating that space to be planted with understory vegetation. So the back of that screen will be screened to some extent with plantings. But I think it's definitely a detail that we are also concerned about and are still working through exactly what is the possibilities for the backside of that screen. I think we don't necessarily want it to also be a digital interface just for distraction of drivers along Canal Street. But it is very much a detail that we're working through as we speak. And your comments about the sorry, my video is also full. Sorry. The comment about the screens being broken up is one that we're more. So I think that is a direction that we are also trending, and appreciate the commentary.
Okay, I actually think plantings on the back would actually be really lovely.
Great.
Now that you mentioned that as an option.
Yeah, I agree. Nick and Karin are really working on those details now, physically what that is, but porosity is an important part. And what it looks like from the other side of Canal Street is important too. So I think we have to really have a great attention to that detail.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go next with Michael.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation, Neil and Nick. I think it was a great presentation. I wanted to say a few things of support. Love that you guys ran with the as much trees or greenery as possible. I couldn't agree with that sentiment more. And I love seeing the permeable surface there. That's fantastic, and I hope to see that in other projects from the DOT as well. You guys can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm getting a little
Yep, you're good.
On my end. Okay, great. My question was in follow-up to CB3's feedback. We've also, had, I think our community board might be on the record, but I know we've had had meetings and presentations talking about how ways to improve pedestrian traffic, cyclist safety on Canal Street. I think, as most of us know, the most defining feature of Canal Street is the high volume of traffic there. So was there any like CB3 feedback, was there any things that you guys thought of that you might be able to incorporate into this design that might improve, pedestrian safety on those crosswalks? And secondly, work just finished up on another traffic triangle in Tribeca, Bogardus Plaza, I believe it is. And in that traffic triangle, what they opted to do was actually fill in the one lane of that it was bordering and turn that into a bigger plaza. And since size is such a big constraint on this, was that ever considered for this project?
Yeah, so appreciate the support and the comments. I think we very much started out looking to see if we could close off Walker Street altogether and do a similar treatment through our plaza program as what occurred up at Bogardus. I'm actually quite familiar with that particular project. Unfortunately, when we started to do the traffic analysis, the volumes using Walker Street and Baxter Street were too significant to merit an actual closure. And so that sort of ruled out the ability to take space on that side in a permanent fashion. I will say one of the things that came out of the discussion with CP3 and what we're trying to work on now via a separate track is looking at the potential for shared streets in both more of our operational quick implementation type style projects, as well as potential future longer term components. Again, there is some deadlines associated with the funding that we have from LMBC for the triangle design itself. So as we've been developing that, we've really tried to do it in a way that doesn't preclude or works well with those future potential improvements, but we are sort of looking at them as two separate tracks. And again, it's still a little early in terms of what we'll be able to implement, but the Borough Commissioner's Office, as well as our unit and a number of other units at DOT are now actively exploring how we can improve Walker and Baxter to really prioritize pedestrian crossings there and make the space more hospitable for those that are hopefully going to use this nice new triangle once it's done.
Fantastic. Glad to hear that's a priority for you guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Neil, you're muted if you wanted to add.
I'm sorry.
Now we can hear you.
In the resolution, board one did, in concert with what you were saying, asked us to come back after having looked at the traffic signals and the pedestrian crossings and everything. So I think that look continues simultaneously.
Okay, let's keep going. Elizabeth, you're next.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for the presentation. It's great to see you really did address a lot of the community concerns and needs. My question goes to the programming of the programmable space. Can you give me a sense of the overall square footage of that space and what you envision in terms of the types of programming or potential programming?
Well, that's a great question. I don't have the square foot off of the top of my head. Maybe Karin, you could do a quick little math as we answer some other questions. We can get back to you with that. But generally speaking, I think we have seen primarily a goal there for gathering of small groups and small performances. Certainly, there's a number of tour groups that move through the neighborhood, both Little Italy as well as Chinatown. This was pre-pandemic, but those are sort of the figures that we're basing it off of. So I mean, that space can comfortably hold probably 40, 50 people without much of an issue, maybe not socially distanced. So I do want to put that caveat there that we still want to be careful until things are truly post-pandemic. But again, I think we very much envision the ability for small performances, whether that's a small music group or a small sort of outdoor gathering. And then obviously interaction with the kiosk itself would allow for smaller groups to occupy the space around it at any given time.
I also want to mention, Nick had mentioned it earlier, we have ongoing discussions with some of our cultural partners like MoCA and Think Chinatown, who are providing some spatial and programming ideas about what the space could accommodate. And in the next iteration, I mean, that's what the design team is really going to look at.
Yeah, that'd be great, especially if you could pull in some cultural content. There are a lot of galleries, you know,
Yeah.
individual art galleries in that area as well. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I think that's really the key, you know, to inscribing as much space as we can for that, and to make it flexible enough to accommodate a number of those activities at any given time.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, let me
Looks like
just,
it's
what, is there anyone else? Okay, let me ask two things. One, remind us how much seating is going to be there, bench space?
So we're at the moment looking at proposing just a single bench along that southern planting area on the west side of the triangle. It's still, you know, we're still working through design details in terms of overall size and dimension. Obviously, we want to be cognizant of some of the more non-desirable uses, I guess, in terms of seating or skateboarding, sleeping or skateboarding, that kind of stuff, while also wanting to make it a comfortable and enjoyable place to spend a little bit of time. So, but that's it in terms of seating.
I want to mention, you know, we're trying to work out the right balance of fixed seating, which the design plan shows, and also movable seating, you know, in conjunction with the partnership and how we can get that involved in the space itself over time.
Just generally speaking, most open spaces that we review as a committee, there's always people asking for seating. So you might want to consider that. And just to clarify again, the informational kiosk is going to be maintained by Chinatown Partnership?
Correct. Yeah, it will. We're obviously working through the specific agreements and structure that will take, but as they currently maintain the existing kiosk and the existing triangle, and they would be responsible for maintaining the new elements that we are designing.
Okay, great. Let's see, did I miss anybody that was looking to speak? Diana, I don't see anyone else. Do you have anyone else?
No, I don't see anybody else.
Okay.
I have an estimate for the concrete area on the eastern portion. It's approximately 1,000 square feet when the kiosk is removed.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I don't think we're going to do any kind of resolution on this tonight. I think we're going to continue to follow it. And obviously, we'd love to see some improvements to that space. I think this is a big improvement over what was rather controversial last time. I didn't want to start with that, but yeah.
No, but you can mention it again. It's a relief from that very hot night.
Yes, I'm relieved too. All right, thank you all for coming down. And I guess we're ready to move on to our next item. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. Really appreciate the opportunity. Take care, all.
You too. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at what's happening and what's planned for St. Andrews Plaza. For those who are unfamiliar, St. Andrews Plaza is the rather large plaza that sits behind the municipal building, between the municipal building and police headquarters. It's a red brick plaza near the courthouses or leading to the courthouses or walking away from them. And it has had some kiosks and some of that concession space in the past. And I think DOT is taking another look at it and possibly considering some changes. So I believe Brandon Buttleman is with us to possibly give us some update. Brad, are you here?
I don't think Brad is here, but Jacky Lazzaro is here from DOT, and I know she was prepared to provide
Okay.
some information on St. Andrews Plaza.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Sorry,
thank you,
Jackie,
Diane.
but
No
are you
worries,
ready
yeah.
to say anything?
Yeah, of course. And again, thank you to the board for having me. As Paul mentioned, DOT did release a RFP seeking concessionaries for the operation, management, and maintenance of the food and beverage kiosks adjacent to the municipal building in the fall of, I believe, 2019. The previous occupant had asked DOT to terminate their contracts, and following that, the kiosks remained inactive for 5 years. So DOT is planning to execute the license for the northern kiosk after the March 8th public hearing. So we're currently working on the contract for the southern kiosk and anticipate getting to the public hearing stage within the next few months. The concession is responsible for, renovating the kiosk, and they have the plans to do so, which would put us in an estimated timeline of fall opening. And the concession is also responsible for maintaining the licensed premises.
Is that the totality of your report?
Yes.
Okay. I believe we did submit a few questions to DOT. Do you have those, Diana?
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions. I know at an earlier time there were plans to redo the plaza, and that wasn't completed. Here are some questions. Was there ever plans for DOT to redo the surface or subsurface of the plaza? Will the planned outdoor comfort station require utilities to be run beneath the plaza? And how will that work be scheduled with the tenancy and renovations of the southern kiosks?
So regarding the renovation of the plaza, I do know that DOT does not have any plans to renovate the plaza at this time. And for the other two questions, I'm not too sure. I would have to get some further clarification on that.
Okay, is that all you have, Diana?
That's all I have, yeah.
Could I just clarify a couple of things? Do you anticipate or know what hours these kiosks would operate? And what
No,
days and hours?
I don't have those hours or that time, but I could definitely get that and share that with the board.
And it looks like you're just looking for food and beverage, no merchandise, right?
From my understanding, yes, it is just food and beverage, but I would have to get some further clarification on that as well.
Okay, if you could do that, and maybe also let us know how many kiosks, booths you're anticipating in that space.
Okay, yeah, definitely, I can do that.
Okay, let me allow some others to weigh in. Andrew, go.
Hi, I believe you mentioned that this was triggered by the prior party seeking to terminate their contract or their agreement. Do you know the reasons why they requested to terminate?
So I don't know, no, I don't know why they had asked for their contract to be terminated. I do know that they did ask DOT to terminate their contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Michael, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a quick question. It's kind of somewhat related, but Jackie, just a quick question. Given its proximity to like One Police Plaza, this area's had a lot of barricades since this last summer. I'm just wondering, what is the typical process through which like barricades are put up and taken down? And I'm just wondering if the concession or the kiosks there have any clauses or provisions that like warn them or get them off the hook for rent if access to that plaza is prohibited?
So that is actually a really good question. And unfortunately, Michael, I don't have the answer for that, but I can most definitely get in touch with my colleagues and touch base with you offline or provide those answers to Diana, excuse me.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, just a thought when it came up. All right, thanks, Jackie.
And just to clarify, the question was, what is the process for adding and removing barriers?
Yeah, like barricades, because I haven't
Barricades.
I have been by, but I can't remember what it looks like in my head now. There might still be barricades up right now, like metal barricades. And so I'm just curious as to what the process is for the placing and removal of those barricades and how that might impact the kiosks there.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I can look into that. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie.
Okay, any other speakers that you have, Diana?
Let's see. That seems to be it.
All right, let me just throw out two other issues that I don't really want to get into a long discussion on, but I just want to raise so the committee is aware that we're working on them. Number one is follow up with the Brooklyn Bridge banks and the dugout space. We had passed a resolution back in November requesting that we work with DOT on trying to make those spaces available for community use as open spaces. And we did have a follow-up conversation with Ed Pinkar, and we're still awaiting to continue that dialogue. So if you could pass that along, and we'd love to have DOT at, maybe next month's meeting to give us some updates on that and to engage in some discussion. The second issue, which also may be coming back to the committee, it deals with a proposal to relocate some bike racks. And this is on Duane Street. And my understanding is that DOT is looking at the bike racks on that street, except the location is in front of a restaurant who has objected, and the community board has shared some of those concerns. I believe DOT has come back and said, well, let's move those bike racks to one of the sides of Duane Park. And the people who run that park have reached out to the community board and indicated that that would interfere with their operations and be detrimental. So I think that's another issue that we should all take a look at and try to understand what the options are. I think the community board, generally speaking, wants to establish as many rental spaces as possible, but anyway, more to come on that. Okay.
Paul, it's Richard. Can I ask what the park folks said? What would interfere with that, with their work? Oh, sorry.
They said it would interfere with some of their water lines underneath, with some of the trees above, with other plantings that usually go very close to where the bikes would go. And I could pass along, they just sent me today, a rather lengthy correspondence that indicated their concerns. If you want me to share it with you, I can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Was the proposal to put the city bike in the street or on the sidewalk?
I believe it's more the sidewalk or one of the, along one of the fences of that park. But again, I am not that familiar with this entire proposal. I just learned about it. I know our transportation committee was discussing this and they were taking the lead on this. So this is really the first I heard about it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Detta, did you have something to say on this?
Yes, I mean, you have members of the Transportation Committee here tonight who could give a lot of clarity on this issue if that's needed. This this docking station would be in the roadway, not on a sidewalk. It would be in the road, and it would replace an area where it's usually parking placard vehicles. And I know it's been before the Transportation Committee several times. The DOT has heard the pushback, has looked into all the other possible locations for it that were presented. They've done a lot of due diligence. They've listened to all representatives from that park and have had a real dialogue with them. So there, Michael Francoeur is also a member of that committee and has been in meetings where this was discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to provide if needed, but I'll let you take this one, Paul.
The only other thing I'll just mention is Carrie, who's the president of Friends of Duane Park, I believe is also on the call, and she had indicated an interest in also very briefly saying a few things. Are you here, Carrie? I'm sorry.
Hello.
Is that you?
Yes, it's Carrie.
All right. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself and just speak for a couple of minutes so people on our committee and transportation, if needed, understand what the issues are.
Sure. So there's a little bit of confusion. So the issue started because Hideaway couldn't operate in front of its bar with the open streets because of the dock. The residents around the block there was a petition that the Hideaway started to move the dock. DOT sent Madeline or phoned Madeline. I don't believe she ever got a letter. DOT phoned Madeline and said they would be expanding the dock as part of their routine expansion plan. The neighborhood got together and raised the issue with Community Board 1 Transportation to try and help Madeline protect from that expansion. So that's the first part. In September, they passed a resolution that said no bikes in front of restaurants because we're trying to support local businesses. All of that is true, and there's been a lot of dialogue back and forth in protecting Duane Park Patisserie and the expansion of the Hideaway dock on Duane Street. What was new was never really presented to the Transportation Committee was we've looked at, well, let me back up. There were a lot of different presentations, some about 4 different sites. I want to go back through transportation. So the gist of the bottom line is DOT's transportation at a presentation in February 2nd said that they were moving ahead with bike docks on Duane Park. And so let me tell you where they plan to do it. Tomorrow, the reason that I didn't plan to have this presentation tonight, and I'm not fully prepared with a linear presentation, is that DOT and the Parks Department are meeting tomorrow, and I expected to have an update before spending time here. You have a lot on your plate. So my plan was to update this committee and update the Transportation Committee, Betty and Michael and the rest, once I had more to say. In the meantime, DOT wanted to know the operational concerns because those are park management kinds of concerns, which then comes to this committee. So the operational dock would be located on the southern perimeter of Duane Park. So that is sort of, we have a long fence line there. And the history of that is that lane there is currently no standing. It's being used by, it used to be used by the state troopers. They don't use it anymore. They're now parked in a parking zone. The buildings department and others do park along that curb, and then they are mostly gone on the weekends. There's no sidewalk there. because the DOT took that space from the park back in the 50s to accommodate Steve Wills and his butter and eggs trucks back in the day. So that was parkland. It was taken by DOT to accommodate the trucks. And now they want to put bike docks there. So we would argue that we should either restore the parkland or put a small sidewalk there so that we can prune the hedges, take care of the trees, and do all the things, maintain our irrigation line that runs along the fence. And then, we're not opposed to bike share. So let's be clear about that. This is not an opposition to bike share. It's not a NIMBY argument. This is simply an operational concern that if you put bike docks right up against the fence because there's no sidewalk, there's a fence post, 3 inches, and a steel curb. So you don't have room to tend to the hedges that grow along the fence or maintain the sprinkler system or clean out the trash. You're going to get this gully of about 9 to 10 inches of leaf matter, trash, and there's a couple of storm drains. So we know come from there. So I was raising it with Paul because, or sent the notice of the letter we sent to a number of officials, including Betty and Tammy, et cetera, because there are these operational concerns that also come into play. So
Okay.
I would just, if we could, ask that we come back in March or at your next meeting when we have more information, and maybe we can either reclaim parkland and restore it, and Friends of Duane Park has offered to pay for it. So to restore that part of park space, also a western part of the park was significantly shortened as well to the west, but add the sidewalk, rejoin our prior perimeter, and then install, and then, have a conversation that is about this site, not about the Duane Park patisserie site. Anyway, that's a recap. And Michael and Betty, if I misstated anything, please correct me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion on this, but as you suggest, perhaps it would make sense to bring this back to the committee next month to discuss it and to talk about it as far as any impacts on the park, et cetera, and where this project stands at that point. Mark, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Thanks, Paul. This came up in landmarks. Bruce had brought it up. I just found out about it, and it just, it's simply outrageous. Enough's enough with these bikes all over the place already. Just give us a break. It's a beautiful park. All the stuff that was stated before, restoring will be fantastic. We need to fight this tooth and nail. And the powers that be, the people that these bike people will say, so you don't even have to qualify, will say that you're against biking because you don't want the bikes there. So just be prepared for that, everybody. Those are their tactics that they use. And we discussed that maybe I believe it's also going to go to Quality of Life Committee. Might be more appropriate as well. Combine it with you guys, with you, Paul. But there's a head of steam on this, and really need leadership that sees the issue beyond just simply that you need more bikes, which and it doesn't have to be this location. Thank you.
Right. There's also a bike dock at Hudson and Reed, so it's within eyesight of the park. So anyway, but that's a transportation argument, not a parks argument. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
It's really just a common sense, aesthetic, beautiful park argument. And the common sense about placing, there's no common sense about placing the bikes there. That's just that simple. It's not like you need to do a modal study or anything like this. It should be there. It shouldn't be there. It's just common sense and pure. This is our neighborhood. The bike rack should not be at the park. It's just that simple.
Be continued. Okay, so thank you all for discussion of that one. And why don't we move on to the next item on the agenda? As you probably know this is Black History Month, and that's an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and the time to recognize their central role in U.S. history and culture. So in recognition of that, we thought it would be a great idea to bring here and invite a couple of the cultural institutions here in Lower Manhattan that work on these issues both this month and throughout the year. So let's start with the African Burial Ground. As some of you know, when the federal government was building a new federal building on Broadway, again near Duane Street, they uncovered a burial ground of both free and enslaved descendants. And it was really something. It was, and we do have some speakers to tell you about what's been going on there and special programming this month and what goes on year round. Number one, we have with us, I believe, Ranger Jim, who many of you know, frequently speaks at community board meetings on behalf of National Park Service. And they have another representative here, Jimmy Cleckley. So I am happy to turn the floor over to you guys and allow you to make a presentation and tell us about your activities this month and throughout the year. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ranger Jim. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, great. I miss everyone there from Community Board 1. I got to make it kind of short because we're cleaning the brass at the African Burial Ground. They have a very strong smell, so it won't take but a couple minutes. Thank you so much. Once again, I miss everyone from being there, going every month. And also, I'd like to tell everyone, please come and visit our memorial. It's open, but only to good weather. We have good weather, we'll have it open for you. And hopefully the ranger can give you a quick little talk and a self-guided tour also. Black History Month, we have a special event, a virtual event on February the 18th at 3 p.m., the Black Family and the Education. Please check that out. And the next one will be February the 20th at 10 o'clock, the playing of the African Games. All these events, follow us. Please look at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We have all the events going on virtual tours. Hopefully, in the near future, we can open up the visitor center and going back to the original plan, giving tours throughout the year. Also, we have a Women Month program coming up next month. In April, we have the National Park Service Ranger Day programs. In June, we have Juneteenth. And also in May, we have Pinkster. So every month, we having programs going on and things like that. So we want to encourage everyone to go online and look at all our events. They are free. So, I mean, it's great. Once again, the Rangers are doing a good job with their virtual tours. And we're eager to get back, open up the visitor center, the memorial, the tours to all the visitors, and keep it going like that every year. It's a wonderful thing to go to all our events and have a special program, especially at Federal Hall. We have virtual program there also. Once again, thank you for having this time with me, and I miss everyone there. Hopefully we can spend more time together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One quick question. Where could people go online to find the schedule of these virtual events?
Yes, that's facebook.com/African Burial Ground.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Jim, did you want to weigh in and say anything further?
I think that
No, I
Jim
think,
and Jimmy may be the same person. Do we have a second on?
Oh,
no, that's the same person. This Ranger Jim, the same person.
oh, so we just found out your name. Okay. Well, we're glad to see you back in circulation a little bit. A few of us were a little concerned, but welcome back. And
All right, thank you.
thank you for the report.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
You too.
All right.
Okay. All right. Next, we have a report from Camus Ware. I don't know if I pronounced that accurately. If not, you'll correct me. Who runs and operates a group called Black Gotham Experience. They've been here in the district. They're located down in the Seaport on Jefferson Street since August 2010. And they do walking tours. They utilize other media to tell the story and to celebrate the impact of the African diaspora on New York City. And Camus is the guy who's the founder of this group, and he's been doing a great job from everything I hear. So I'd like to make more people aware of this cultural institution here in the district, and to tell us also what type of programming you're doing during these tough COVID days and other tours, virtual tours, I assume it is now these days.
Awesome. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for being here. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, thank you for that introduction. And thank you all here at Community Board 1 for your service. I know you have long meetings and do the people's business. So thank you for taking time to do this. And also, I'm happy to share on behalf of all the people part of Black Gotham Experience what we like to do. I do have some visuals. I'm an artist before I became a historian, so we like to show things when we can. So I'm going to share my screen. I am a little more native to Zoom than I am WebEx. So if I have some technical problems, it's not WebEx, it's me. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, so far you're crushing it.
Yep.
I'd like crushing it. So first and foremost, this is not a slide tailor-made for Community Board 1, but you will notice that a lot of the focal points of the stories that we tell about the Black experience in Manhattan and New York focuses on CB1. And what Black Gotham Experience is this creates work at that intersection of scholarship and aesthetics to give people a chance to experience history. Part of our philosophy is that history is not something that happened in the past, but that history is what's happening now. We happen to the moment, and we like to get people to engage in history. And so I'm going to give you some background about who we are. This could be very much an introduction. Some people with Community Board 1 I might already know, but I would love to, be somebody who you're familiar with. We are in the Seaport District. We are right there on Front Street, right off of John Street. And this was a great opportunity that was provided to us from Lower Manhattan Cultural Council with support from Howard Hughes. And we initially had a process-based grant in 2016. We had an office space. And then we were able to get this, about 2,000 square feet of space that was meant to be a residency for 4 months. But because the work we've done has been able to reach so many people, we've had schools, universities, different countries, ambassadors who want to not just hear about the history about the 1800s, 1900s, but New York City, goes back further than that. And so we have even international connections that we've been able to establish, not just with the space, but just with the stories that we tell. And so this is me, a bit younger, a little smaller, less hair. This is the first Black Gotham walking tour ever. I gathered my friends and I gave them a 3-hour tour. And back then, it wasn't Black Gotham Experience. It was just Black Gotham. There wasn't 2 tours. There was 1 tour. Now we have like almost like 9 different tours. Over half of them have been commissioned by different organizations like Brick or No Longer Empty, Public Design Commission right there in City Hall. And so we think that there's a lot of power in being mobile and moving through spaces and being kinesthetic and being mindful and mobile at the same time. There's a lot about Black history that can be challenging, and there's a lot of difficult things to talk about, and one of my examples is Emmett Till, who was one of the major forces for the second round of the civil rights movement. But it's hard to tell somebody in first grade about the way Emmett Till was killed. It's a lot easier to talk about Rosa Parks not giving up her seat. And so we talk about the things that might be difficult, but by using creativity, there's a lot more agency that you have when you begin to embody the history versus just hearing about it and having to like sit with it. We walk and we talk about it. And that's been something that's been very powerful for the people who've experienced our different programs. A major turning point for us was when we began to figure out how do we create images where there are none. And as I mentioned, I'm a photographer and artist first and foremost. As we began to say, how do we create archives that don't exist in the archive? I began to use photography and design to illustrate what was missing from the narrative of New York City and of the African diaspora. And even though it's not the first thing that we've done, the walking tour came first, but this process of archive making, of stepping into the void and showing what's not a part of the discussion creates new conversations. And so we're still working on the graphic novel, but before we even finish the first book, we have moved on to doing other things. Here goes something fairly recent. This was like last September, Waterfront Alliance. I did a series of flags that have pieces on them that relate to American, Indigenous, and African connections that go back to the 1600s when the area was called Lenape-Hoken. We also did a project with Think Chinatown this past October. And so I want to give a shout out to Corky, who recently passed, who helped raise some of the funds to pay for the commission. And it might seem like like why is Chinatown and Black Gotham working together? It's like, well, A, we love storytelling, and B, there is an overlap between the land of the Blacks and Chinatown. And so we wanted to celebrate that commonality of resiliency and neighborhood making and place making that goes back to the 1600s. We also have a piece that's up now with the Shed called Fighting Dark. That's about the 1863 riots that most of you probably have heard of, called the draft riots. I'm here to tell you that that is a misnomer, that the draft riots lasted for more than a day. It lasted for 4 days, and the draft was pretty much shut down the first morning / afternoon. But for the next 3 days, Black people were under assault, and there were lots of people that were murdered in New York City, and we need to come to terms with what happened in New York and be at least as progressive as places like in Alabama that acknowledge the places where people have been harmed unnecessarily. And so this is an audio walking tour you can take from home by just using your ears and a headset. One of my buddies used surround sound, or you can actually use your headset and go and walk around. And as you can see behind me and my friend Bree, we're right there in City Hall Park. And so a lot of the history in New York is right in Community Board 1. Shout out to Jimmy. I got a chance to meet him a little while ago. I worked with the architect of the African Burial Ground and also Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. And we're working on developing programs at the African Burial Ground that expands how much Black history there is in Lower Manhattan, but often it is unmarked. Even though, don't want to not acknowledge we have a David Dinkins building, a Thurgood Marshall building, a Black Lives Matter Plaza, Triumph for the Human Spirit, African Burial Ground, but there's other parts of Lower Manhattan that have a lot of Black history that people don't know about. And one of them is City Hall. And so we were commissioned to create this piece 3 years ago now, 2018. And that was the debut of a tour, the first actual tour of City Hall that focused on Black history was premiered in 2018. And now I'm working with the good people at the New York Public Design Commission to make a series of videos so people have access to this history during a time of COVID where screens are more familiar to us than human touch. And here's a little taste of how we gathered in front of City Hall. There's a little piece that was done by WNYC that was really nice, that gave people an audio sense of what took place. And once again, if you look at this map that we passed out, you know, you go back to this green dot, you know, when New York was first called, you know, back then New Amsterdam. And then you have the time period of the English where the City Hall had to move to Wall Street. And then you have our Republic, you know, where City Hall is over here, where it currently is. You know, this is all right in CB1, and there's so much history that you could have like a heat map of all the layers of history going from the Dutch to the English to our time period. But a lot of that history is like trapped. You know, we have a lot of layers of story that need to be told, and it's just like wasting good food. It's just like protein spoiling that people could eat up, you know, if it was more visible in the public square or in the media space. And that's a part of what Black Gotham Experience is doing through a range of partnerships, be it private, public, or charitable organizations. And I just want to give you a little story about something that happened in Community Board 1 or in Wall Street that people often don't know about. And it's definitely not something that you see when you go to Federal Hall. But there's a very important court case that happened in colonial New York before we had our revolution in 1776, 75. And that's the 1741 court case that has a lot to do with the way the British began to establish white privilege and racial identity as a means to make it easier to have a city based on slavery and poor white people, but not have the working class people align together and work against the British. A lot of times we keep having the same conversations in our country about race and racism and white privilege or white supremacism. And people often look to the 1960s or look to the South in the 1800s and don't realize that some of this stuff was already cooked up in like the 1700s. And we just kind of like embrace some of that and don't realize how much that is a part of who we are, and that these systems predate our ideas of a Bill of Rights. And so these are not ideas that are easily overcome. It's very much a part of our culture. And it's right there on Wall Street where there was a court case that tried, you know, dozens of people, and people were, you know, capital punishment was enforced for people who were a part of a conspiracy to overturn the British authority. And that was mostly people of African descent, but you also had people that were poor and considered white now, but didn't consider themselves white then, because white didn't have as much import back then. People were more connected to their ethnicity than their this idea of whiteness. But it's a fascinating story. I'm just giving you a little bit of an hors d'oeuvre now, but check it out. 1741 New York Conspiracy. We have programs about it. Winding down, City Hall is a beautiful building, oldest working city hall in the country. And for the first time in the history of New York, the business of the city has been disrupted for the longest time period in the history of New York, going back to 1664, where the Common Council or City Council is not meeting regularly. But there's a lot of important paintings in there that tell you stories that you might not know. You might just say, oh, that's George Washington, or that's Macomb, or that's John Jay. But you look at them a little bit deeper and with some guidance, there's a lot more history there than meets the eye. For example, here you have General Washington, and you have the pedestal that King George III was on that was torn down. But what people often don't realize is right in front of that pedestal, when his grandfather was the monarch, there was that uprising of 1741 that turned into a court case where King George II was the plaintiff, and the defendants were people of African descent who were basically being charged with doing the same thing that General Washington is going to do a whole generation later. And then you have this people like Samuel Francis, who often people don't even realize is a person of color. And I can understand that, you know, it wasn't Instagram back then. But the point is that there's a lot of people that were a part of America's story that just don't really get their picture in the book. And that's something that we can do something about. You know, we can't change the past, but once again, history is not a one-sided affair. We can choose to be more, you know, active in how we tell stories and how we can tell stories that are more true and inclusive. And I don't want to wrap up without pointing out something that I feel is very valuable, especially in 2021, is that people think that New York City has always been a progressive place. But New York City has been a place that has traditionally, going back to the early days of the Republic, didn't want slavery to end collectively. There was a lot of argument about what it would mean for business owners who had investments in the South, what it would mean for quote unquote the working class, white males that were immigrants. And here you have Fernando Wood and Horatio Seymour, both Democrats, both anti-abolitionists. And then to the right, you have George Opdyke, who was a Republican mayor, who in 1863 was ran out of City Hall by an angry white mob. Might sound familiar. And the point is that these kind of cycles repeat themselves because we often don't understand how much is a part of our culture. And of course, I could go on, but I'm not trying to keep you all here until midnight. Final few points is 5 Points is a famous neighborhood in New York City, right on the corner of your district. But one thing that people often don't know about is that if you look at the footprint of 5 Points in some of these classic pictures, behind here, what you have is a map that points to some of the folks who first owned property and land there, going back to 1643. And that was when this area was a part of what became known as Land of the Blacks. And Catalina and Domingo were some of the first landowners. Here goes some more. This is in CB2. This is Washington Square Park. Anthony Portuguese, Paulo de Angola, Manuel Trumpeter. These are all people of African descent who became landowners before New York City was ever invented. But if you walk in these same places, you would never know because we've decided as a city that that's not important. So final few points. We're not a nonprofit. We're a small business. We rely on membership. We rely on our audience. We rely on partnerships. And one of the cool things that I hope continues and goes forward, is that people can have fun talking about things that are challenging. People can have a good time, discussing things that might not be easy because being a human being isn't easy, And so having a membership, we learn to connect with like-minded people and not carry the weight all by ourselves. And so my final slide is people often don't know that the Statue of Liberty was given to us as a gift by the French after we won the Civil War. And we being the North, we being the Union, in which you have as a woman with chains at her feet broken and a light lifted for freedom. And I think that we can have that story exist. At the same time, we could have the story of Emma Lazarus and Joseph Pulitzer that were Sephardic Jews that celebrated the importance of liberty and not being a place that didn't welcome people. I think all these stories can live and it's all part of the New York story, but often people forget that we have a Statue of Liberty not to welcome immigrants initially, but to celebrate the people that were here would now have some kind of freedom that was denied by the Republic. So I'm a nerd. I like to share history. I also like to listen. And so I'm happy to stop my sharing now and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. But let me open it up for you and get a few people who have their hands up. Justine, you want to get it started?
Sure, thanks. Thanks so much. Camus, is that how you say it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and help. It's 5 letters, 3 syllables. Kamau.
Kamau. Excuse
Yes.
me. Sorry.
No, your effort. A minus.
A minus. How about like maybe a D minus, but Kamau.
Yes.
So one of the things that you said, which was fascinating to me, I mean, a lot. You educated me about a lot that I had no idea about. So thank you for that, first of all. But secondly, you said Black history is trapped. I'm wondering if post-COVID, perhaps, and in warmer weather, it'd be great. I've thrown this out like to Paul and to just for all of CB1, since the history you talk about is in our district.
Totally.
What about having CB1 take a walking tour, an abbreviated walking tour, and then depending on the space, which Diana and Paul could talk to you about, whatever, but then have a full board meeting in your location at the Seaport.
I'm all for it.
It would be amazing to be able to partake and have us as a community board
totally
come into your world and learn more and be more intricately involved, which then brings me to the second question. How does one become a member?
Cool. Thank you for that. Well, I think one of your people on your board is a member already. But we have it's blackgotham.com/membership, and there's multiple different levels that you can join. And yeah, that's how you become a member. And we would be more than happy to host Community Board One. And, we used to have like these walking tours. I would start with a reception. We did them a lot of times for businesses for their outing, where they would come and they would have like a tour, like orientation, and then we do our walk and come back and have food that relates to part of the experience, whether it be like a West Indian connection or West African, Central African connection, because a little bit of food. I don't know, maybe some rum if you're over 21. I don't know if you guys are over 21 or not, but water is also available. But
Water, yeah. Well, yeah, for the full board meeting, I think that many of us would love the rum and the food, but I think we have to like pay attention and do the board. But yeah, I think it'd be a great thing if afterwards. There you go. There you go. I like that. I think it would be amazing. And yeah, wow. Thank you.
In the meantime, I do a lot of these types of conversations. And I think that, one thing you learn about history is there's always a window, there's always a door. Things might be terrible, but everything happens and you can't change it, but you have to find your purpose while you're in it. And I've been able, we as a group, as a team, we've been able to reach probably more brains because the accessibility is turn your computer on versus come down to Lower Manhattan. And so we've been able to have a lot more conversations actually in the pandemic, and we do look forward to having more real-time conversations. But in the meantime, mitigation sometimes, can work its own magic.
Okay, great. Andrew, you're up next.
Camo, thanks very much for that overview. I must admit, I was not very familiar with the organization, so it was incredibly helpful, and your presentation was very educational.
Thank you.
And related to education, my question is, what outreach have you done, can you do with schools across the city, but particularly across Lower Manhattan? And do you have any program currently that might apply to the various educational structures of K through 5, middle school, high school, et cetera? And then I would also suggest you consider, and we can help with that, getting you in front of our youth and education committee at some point.
Yes, I see Francis clapping, our mutual friend. I'm all for it. I'm actually what I call a pedagogue. My mother's an educator, retired. My father's a preacher, retired. I actually got certified to teach in Pennsylvania before I moved to New York, back when No Child Left Behind was not quite passed yet. And so I got certified to teach K through 8. And so I've taught in charter schools, public schools, which is the same thing, but you know the difference. I love education, and part of what has been an important part of how I've grown Black Gotham Experience is, the same way you make it plain for a 4th grader, it's the same thing for the provost of a university. Make it engaging, repeat what you got to repeat, give everybody a chance to get at-bats, exit ticket, did you get it, move on. So I love teaching, and I think that Black Gotham Experience is kind of very much based on the same thing that I used when I had a 2nd grade classroom, which is, make it fun, but keep it real. And I think that Lehman, which is a private school, has done Black Gotham like the last 3 years. City School for the Arts, a charter school, last 3 years. A number of schools, even, schools, of course, out of CB1 too, have made Black Gotham Experience a core part of their curriculum. So I would love to find ways to scale it and be smarter about it. And so all I'm saying is I'm a willing participant to find ways to reach more people. And because, we got inspired by a child. I missed that part, but it was a child that inspired this whole process. Somebody asked me a question in 2008 that changed my life. And it's like, wow, she was like 11. So kids are where the youth is where it's at.
And I would just add, you're an inspirational kind of speaker guy. So I think that's a great idea. And I think we could be helpful if you'd like to get hooked up with different youth organizations, including our committee.
We'd love it. We'd love it.
Diana, can we make sure we have Camo's contact details, and I'll coordinate with Tricia?
Sure, I'll send that to you, Andrew.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, Andrew. All right, speaking of Francis, why don't you go next? There you go.
I'm happy this is happening. I have
Hello.
hi. I am I have to say that he opened my eyes. Okay. He's a young blood and I'm an old woman. And when I first saw that exhibit and I went on his site and started looking at all the wonderful things that he's doing, done, and will do, I was totally impressed and was hoping that this would happen, that he would get exposure to the community board because he has so much to offer our community. You know, I have a different perspective of the whole neighborhood. You have to take his walking tour. You can just put it in your ears, as he said, and it's really what he's saying. And then when you get to the end, Chambers Street, it was like, I can't believe all of this history is right underneath my feet. But I am so proud of everything that you're doing, and I'm looking
Thank
forward,
you.
and hopefully everybody else on the committee and the community board will be able to take advantage of his wonderful, like Paul, like you said, Paul, he's a vibrant presenter and he makes it very interesting. So I'm so overwhelmed. I really am very happy that this is happening. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your
And
continued support.
go on his website. He has pictures, and I mean his website is awesome. And I'm telling you that walking tour will knock your socks off. He's done a lot of good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
And thank you, and thank the people on the community board, I should, for turning me on to you and your organization, because I too wasn't really too familiar, but I'm glad we're taking this opportunity tonight to start changing that.
But we have a few things. We're actually doing something with Westfield at the Oculus later this month. So Diana reached out to me. I'll send her the information. We're also doing a couple posts with Downtown Alliance. So I'll do a follow-up email so that things can, matriculate within the organization. But once again, thank you all for your service. This is what makes New York work. People, being tough and making it happen. So thank you all for what you do.
Could you take one or two more people?
Sure.
Okay, because I have Taylor Banning. Taylor, introduce yourself and
Hi.
go.
Taylor,
Hi,
your name is familiar.
Yes, because I joined as a member this summer, and in COVID times, I haven't actually been able to meet you. So it's a pleasure to meet you, Kamau.
Is your screen on? Can I see your face for the first time?
I can't control it on WebEx. I'm not allowed.
Taylor, I'm gonna upgrade you since it's
wow, this is a happy day for me. Okay.
I know your name.
I've never been upgraded before. Can I show my camera? Okay, here we go. This is me.
Hi, Taylor.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. I guess I just wanted to say that my sister and I both grew up in CB1. We're like a decade apart. We went through two different school systems, and neither of us learned about our history of downtown. And it's sad and disappointing, but as I begin to learn and take time to learn from your tours and your business and the things you say, it's been enlightening and so informative, and I can't wait to keep learning and sharing with my community and neighbors. So I guess I had a few questions, like, what can we do as a community? Do we come and, like, I guess it's COVID times, but how can we get involved? And is there a way, I'm a member, but beyond that as well, and is there a way that all your events this month can be posted to the community board? Because I get those emails too.
Right. I think we just another member of Black Gotham, Urilla, who's on here as well. She just joined us as a producer, and last year we kind of had to like shrink our staff. And then you was the first person, I think we've been able to like, grow again earlier in this month. And so, we're beginning to build up our capacity again, because it was like, everything that was involved in person just kind of shrunk up. And so we've been like, taking steps toward, finding ways to reestablish ourselves. And so we're going to we missed our meeting today because I was finishing a movie that will be seen soon. It's part of the Fighting Dark project, but we should, and I'm making a public note and asking my friend and producer to make a note. We'll put all of our events on our website, but also send those links to CB1. And also for members, we're going to have like a behind the scenes event, a free event before the month is out. We're going to announce it like this week. I know it's not that much time left, but we're going to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Did you have two questions? Or one?
I guess the other reason maybe you remember me is my friend Kareem Fletcher, an artist who the portrait of George Floyd this summer in the midst of the protests happening downtown, like literally on the street.
Right.
And it's like a profound piece. He incorporated handprints of protesters, and his piece, actually his handprint, it transformed. And the Seaport District has his vinyls up on the windows.
Oh, nice.
Near you guys. Yeah. And it's really beautiful. And it's sort of, I guess in his, I won't say it as well as he says it, but they're meant to be an inspiration of how we all can come together, like you say, in the present moment and every day, and try and learn and grow and build our community together.
1,000%. Amen to that.
Building on the history in the present, as you say. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Let me just conclude with a couple of personal comments. One is a question, actually. You're obviously neighbors with one of our other major historical institutions downtown, the Seaport Museum. Do you guys work together? Or...
We do.
Okay.
We do.
Well,
We've done a couple of events together, and Captain John and I are on a first name basis, and we have each other's phone numbers, so we communicate, and we have some pretty big ideas. I think it's a matter of just like timing, but I went to the Netherlands by invitation, which was such a blessing 2 years ago, and when I came back, I was like, hey, like there's a way for us to there's other seaport or like port museums or maritime museums thinking differently about how they want to tell the story of the maritime experience, which is not just, steamships, it's also slave ships, right? And so I think there's a way that we can tell a lot of like New York City's origin stories in different ways, and not to kind of put it's not like a secret, but the Seaport Museum and Black Gotham Experience, we've done things together, and we're going to continue to work together. And I think people will be excited to see what we have to offer.
And finally, I just wanted to mention that I was reading up about you a little bit before the meeting. And one of the things I saw was that you're an alum of the Tenement Museum.
Yes, indeed.
And your connection to Community Board 1 actually went back to that, because I believe the person who was the chairman of the board was one of our greatest board members, a guy named Ray O'Keefe. And Ray was a great guy. He was affiliated with and the chairman of the board. And he was a member of Community Board 1 for the long.
Wow. No, I mean,
this area. So he was a great guy. I don't know if you knew him, but I got a kick out of that.
The name is familiar, but I remember I was there, I think like Ruth Abrams, Ruth like last couple of years. I'm surprised her last name wrong. But yeah, like the Tenement Museum, like my years there were pivotal. That's where the inspiration for Black Gotham Experience came, from that little girl's question, because I love stories. I love stories, and I'm telling stories about like a German Jewish woman who has to figure out how to raise her kids and still make money. And I'm telling that story like a lot of animation, and there's like a little Black girl who's just kind of like, where the Black people at though? This is kind of like, I never thought about Black history not being something that was a part of New York's origin story. And so I felt like I wanted to find a way to answer her question and answer all kind of little girls' questions, you know? And so, you know, as a parent, you know, my son's, you know, 23 now, just finished college, but like anybody who's raised a child knows that you know, you're going to learn a lot being a parent, you know? And so you have to listen to the youngsters because they're going to open your minds up. You know, it's not a one-way street. And I feel like my experience at the tenement plus that little girl together just kind of was like, all right, we can talk about different types of culture and history, but let's make sure that we're answering those kind of questions without waiting to be challenged. Because she called me out. I wasn't talking about Black history. Oops, I'm doing it now.
Good. She was your inspiration. Great.
Very much so.
All right. I don't see any other people with hands up.
My hand is up.
Pat has a legitimate hand up. Go for it.
I just
Go ahead. I think.
I just joined. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I just joined. I just put in my membership now.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to encourage more people to do that, right?
Thank you. That's great. We greatly appreciate it. I know last year, like April, it was like, you know, that was like, that's how we survived for like about a good 2 months when we had like all the walking tours went away was, we didn't even like tell everybody like, hey, help us out. People was kind of like, dude, you must need us to buy membership. And people started buying memberships. And that's how we survived and was able to turn a corner until we started doing more stuff using, you know, Zoom and doing digital programming. So you know, it definitely matters. And I don't forget the name. That's why I knew Taylor's name. And of course, I know Francis. So looking forward to connecting with you soon.
Great. Okay, Camo. Hopefully we generate a couple more memberships for you. And I thank you one more time. It's
my pleasure.
Very informative and very nice meeting you.
Awesome. Likewise.
Okay. Unless anyone has any new business, I'm going to adjourn for the evening. Anything else? Okay, committee, you have a great evening. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon.